Today, we're taking a deep dive into the final trailer of the final episode of the final season of The Boys. Now, after episode 7 left us with a new president to be announced, we saw Annie and MM saving some Homelander ex-supporters and Soldier Boy being put on ice again, and of course, the death of Frenchie. We're left to wondering what's gonna happen next. Well, based on this trailer, looks like Butcher plans to end all soups, and we see Annie versus the Deep, and the show remember that Ryan exists, and we might see a rematch between him and his father, Homelander. There's a lot to speculate about based on this trailer, so let's break down each shot, and later in this video, I'll be sharing my final predictions for each character. So with that said, spoiler warning about the previous episodes alongside with my theories and predictions based on this trailer. Now, the title of this finale is Bone and Blood, and it's rumored to be about an hour and 5 to 6 minutes long. Now, if you guys don't remember, this title is referring to the speech given by Homelander in the Season 3 premiere episode, which was titled Payback. Now, you all will remember that this is when Homelander suggested that he and Butcher
something a little more scorched earth, shock and awe,
and blood and bone, which is the exact quote that is spoken by Butcher throughout this trailer, which I think indicates who's going to end up on top. Now, the trailer opens with Butcher walking into a room with the boys who are watching what I'm assuming is a television screen as they have a look of worry and concern on their face, as Butcher is saying that they need to end the whole notion of soups. So, first thing that comes to mind is, where are the boys currently? This looks like someone's home and it's not their hideout. Now, it obviously makes sense to me that they left their hideout after Frenchie's death, but again, whose home is this? I'm like 99.9% sure that they're most likely at the Gen V hideout house that we saw at the end of episode 7 with Marie and Jordan. But maybe they are somewhere else entirely, but again, I think they're in that house. But I will say, and this might be a long shot, I would hope that maybe they're temporarily hiding out at Maeve's place because, yes, I know she had her powers taken away back in season 3, and of course we know she left the show, but it just would be nice to see her one last time considering how important her character was in the first 3 seasons of this show. Now, during Butcher's speech about ending soups, we get the shot of Old Father and the Deep talking to one another until they're stopped because of the arrival of Homelander. Now, the look on both Old Father and the Deep's face to me say that they are more terrified than ever of Homelander, which would suggest that maybe he just did something that makes them worried about their own lives. Now, we know that in episode 7, Ashley was preparing to be announced as a new president, but we also know that Homelander was also planning to announce his new rules and his new laws for America and also his new title as God. So maybe during that announcement or during this press conference, things go terribly wrong. Maybe some of the reporters in the room aren't on board with these announcements and they start asking questions about what actually happened to the previous president, and they start to question Homelander about his new rules and laws against Starlighters and all the different nonsense he's spewing out. And because of that, I would imagine Homelander will finally snap being questioned and him snapping publicly on television, which is what the boys were probably watching at the start of this trailer, and it will be like what Homelander envisioned, which was from a few seasons ago, which he lasered everyone in the crowd. Now, our next shot shows MM looking unsure about what's about to happen next, as Butcher and him are now holding crowbars. Now, we all know that crowbars are Butcher's choice of weapon, both in the show and also the comics, which, speaking of the comics, his crowbar is used in a very important moment. But as it pertains to the shot, I would imagine this is them preparing to use these crowbars to break into a warehouse, which we see in this next shot. Which, speaking of, we see this shot of all the boys entering what looks to be some random warehouse. Now, I'm saying warehouse, but this could be somewhere else entirely, like maybe the boys are sneaking into Vought. Now, let's just assume this is a warehouse, and maybe they're going to be using this warehouse to finishing the final steps of assuring Kimiko has gained the similar powers to Soldier Boy, which is being able to remove Soup's powers. Or again, are the boys about to break into Vought in hopes to getting something that can help them take down Homelander, and maybe in doing so, they're going to find Soldier Boy who's still on ice, which we'll be discussing a little bit later in this trailer. From here, we hear more of Butcher saying scorched earth and shockwave and all. Now, during this, we see Annie versus the Deep at the White House, as we see she sends the Deep flying outside. Now, this shot of them fighting might be seen later in this trailer, but I've been saying for weeks now that it only makes sense for Annie to be the one to kill the Deep based on their history. Now, we see MM holding a gun in this shot here as he's entering a room with Hughie behind him. Again, I'm assuming that all the boys are going to be in the White House at some point in the episode, and this being their final mission to take down Homelander. But it still always just makes me laugh seeing the boys carrying guns, knowing damn well that bullets can't stop or hurt Soups. Now, our next shot shows Kimiko crying, and I would bet this is probably the boys probably giving Frenchie a proper burial as they say their final goodbyes, and they're going to be using it as fuel to taking down Homelander. Now, while the positioning of what I'm assuming is Frenchie's funeral is in the middle of this trailer, I would bet that this is probably going to actually happen at the beginning of the episode to continue the final moments of what happened to him at the end of episode 7. Now, next we see Butcher in the same house or location from the start of this trailer, which again, I think he's at the Gen V hideout, as he has this look of determination and focus on his face to completing the mission no matter the cost, like he told Hughie when they were captured last week. Now, something I forgot to mention in my breakdown last week was where was Terror when Homelander arrived at the boys' hideout? Now, the look on Butcher's face in this shot. Is it possible that we learned that before Homelander flew off and before killing Frenchie that he might have killed Tara? As you would imagine, Tara would run up to Homelander trying to hump him, but Homelander ends up killing Butcher's dog. As we know, killing dogs is the ultimate game changer. Ask John Wick about that. But I had bet a while ago that I would imagine that Tara's going to probably die, and that being like the last straw of Butcher's humanity. Again, that might not be the case, but I just feel like something's going to happen to Butcher that's going to just really make him snap. And it's going to be like a parallel story of like Homelander finally snapping and Butcher finally snapping and them both just going ham. Now, as the blood monologue continues, he says blood and all as we get this shot of Ryan in some cabin as Homelander arrives. Now, last we saw Ryan, he was recovering from his ass whooping that his dad gave him as he disappeared after Homelander was trying to help him recover. Now, if I were to bet, I bet this is the same cabin that's probably close to where Becca died, and also the same cabin that Homelander took little Ryan to when Stormfront was still alive. The reason I think this is the same cabin because the very next shot is of Becca's headstone, so again, this just makes me think that this is Ryan going back to the place where his life completely changed. Now, I have to say, I'm glad that Ryan does appear in the finale because I was worried that the show kind of forgot about the character, which has been so frustrating this season because Ryan was positioned as the one to take out Homelander back in season 2 and 3, but then his grandfather, Soldier Boy, just completely derailed that whole plot, which, by the way, it's been confirmed by the showrunner, Eric Kripke, that we shouldn't be expecting to see Soldier Boy in the finale, which is crazy to me. Now, I hope that maybe he was misquoted because how on earth can you not have Soldier Boy in the finale, considering that he was basically the main character for most of this season? But to backtrack on this scene, will Ryan go against his dad for round 2, or is this a trap put together by Butcher and the boys to lure Homelander to them? Our final shots of the trailer show old father using his powers to burst through a door. Now, is old father getting ready to fight one of the boys, or has he switched teams and maybe he's going against Homelander, which I would imagine Homelander's going to be able to take him out pretty easily? Or could this be a shot of old father trying to take out his wife Ashley, as we see her running away from something or someone underground? Again, is this tied to her after the press conference, or did Homelander instruct old father to kill her because maybe, just maybe, Ashley finally spoke up against Homelander and told the public that he killed the president and also told them all the other terrible things that Homelander has done. Our last shot show Butcher opening up the virus. We see Hughie entering an elevator looking worried, and I could be wrong, but I think that Hughie is probably in the elevator in Vought. Now, if this is Hughie in the elevator in Vought, that would be a nice callback to season 1 because that was one of his first missions, which was to sneak into Vought to plant in a microphone. And again, if we're assuming that he's in the elevator going into Vought, could we see Hughie wake up Soldier Boy for like a post-credit scene showing him fully waking up? Now, next we see Butcher in the same house from the start as he says the superheroes are done, as we get this mysterious shot of an unknown person or persons crash landing into the sand. Now, I believe that this shot is a continuation of the fight between Annie and the Deep, and as I've been predicting all season long, we're going to probably see Annie beating up the Deep, and as she's about to kill him, at the very last second, a sea creature, probably Xander, which was voiced by Samuel Jackson, is going to pop out of the water and probably bite off the Deep's head or just eat him alive, and again, we're going to probably see the death of Deep in this scene. So before we get into my final predictions, let's just kind of recap the trailer. So the speech from Butcher throughout the trailer again was the same conversation that he had with Homelander back in season 3. The exact same dialogue was being used between them two. But again, hearing it from Butcher this time around makes me think that Butcher is going to ultimately be the one that kills Homelander. But overall, I would say this was a pretty nice trailer that really kind of plays into the stakes of the situation and really kind of plays to the seriousness of the finale, which I hope they do stick the landing on. Now, with all that being said, it is time to go over all the remaining important characters and share my final predictions for them in the finale. Let's start off by talking about some of the supporting characters who I doubt will probably show up in the finale, but just in case. Starting off with Zoe and Zamir. I give them like a 10% chance of showing up at a finale, and if they do, they're probably going to be seen in some type of montage of them watching the news of how Homelander is dead now as they carry on with the rest of their lives. Again, I talked about this character earlier, and that being Maeve. I know it's a long shot, but I just think the character was just so important to the show. She was so important to Annie's journey, and it would just be nice. It's selfish on me because I doubt that she's going to show up, but again, she was just such a pivotal character that it would just be nice to see her one last time. Now, I would say Stan Edgar is and was important to the boys earlier in the seasons, and of course, he's one of the few characters that crossed over from the boys into Gen V, so will he be seen in the finale? I definitely think we'll see him, but similar to Zoe and her dad, I could see a similar situation where he's like in a montage shot of him escaping the cell and he being put in a position where he's going to probably take over Vatican as the CEO. Which of course, that's assuming that the soup still exists after the finale, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. Next, let's talk about the Gen V crew. Now, Eric Kripke has already confirmed and said that episode 7 and the finale weren't meant to be the last time that we saw the characters of Gen V because he didn't know that their show was going to be canceled. So he's basically implying that they're not going to have much of an impact in the finale. So I could see the Gen V crew helping the group that Annie and MM brought to their hideout in last week's episode. And I do think that the shots that we saw in this trailer was their hideout. And besides Marie and Jordan, we might see Kate, we might see Sam, we might see Emma, but my guess is probably not. Now, I doubt that any of them will be involved in the final battle, but if they were, obviously, probably Marie would be the one involved because, again, we know what her powers are. But based on the comments by Eric Kripke, I don't think we're going to see much of Gen V in the finale. I don't see them being involved in the final battle with Homelander, but I do expect to see them in the future, that being some boys spinoff and that being the Boys Mexico and them being involved in that show. So with that being said, I think there's a 100% chance of them surviving, but I also think there's probably a 95% chance that they're not heavily involved in the finale. Now let's switch gears and talk about the main cast and talk about Team Homelander. Starting off with the new appointed president, Ashley. Now, I think seeing her running underground implies that she's running for her life. Now, is she running because she betrayed Homelander, or is Homelander just ordering someone like Old Father to kill her because she's no use of them anymore? My guess is that she probably is going to betray Homelander because that's been set up this whole season, like her finally growing a backbone, and I ultimately see her probably still surviving at the end of the day because she's been surviving this whole show. Now, if she does survive, I think we'll probably see her in a spinoff as well, but not like a big character, probably like a little cameo or whatnot. So I'm going to give Ashley a 85% chance of surviving the finale. Now, speaking of Ashley, what if she's running to go to Sage's bunker because her plan of the world ending is actually happening? Which is probably doubtful, but with that said, what do we expect from Sage in the finale? Now, Sage was the only main character that wasn't in this trailer, which to me suggests that she might not be as important in the finale, or maybe she, again, continues to help with Kimiko finally getting Soldier Boy's powers, and she survives, or she could probably die in the finale. Either way, I have to just say it, the show has completely dropped the plot and the ball on her being labeled as the world's smartest person. It kind of made her less and less important and less valuable and less smart as this season went on. So with that being said, I do think she will be in the finale. She just not be an important character. So I'm going to give Sage a 75% chance of surviving. Now let's talk about Old Father. I'm surprised that he honestly has lived this long, and I just want to say now that there is probably a 1,000% chance that he dies in the finale. Whether he stays on Homelander's side and he dies at the hands of one of the boys, or he switches sides and Homelander kills him, either way, I don't think Old Father will be making it out of this finale. All right, let's talk about the Deep. Now, I'm 99.99% sure he's gonna die at the hands of Annie or at the hands of some sea creature or at the mouth of a sea creature, but there's a 1% chance that he lives and he's carried into the future, and that being the Boys Mexico series, because I think about what he said in last week's episode about going to San Antonio or Tucson, which if you don't know, those are literally a couple hours away from the border. So again, I bet that he is going to die, but there is a chance that he lives and we see him again in the spinoff series. Next, we have to talk about Soldier Boy, and again, Eric Kripke said that we probably won't see him in the finale, but in case we do, it's probably a safe bet that we're going to see him in a post-credit scene, obviously leading into the prequel Vought Rising series, but also it could leave the door open for him appearing in the future, and that being again in the Boys Mexico series. And lastly, let's talk about the man himself, Homelander. Now, we saw the iconic crowbars of Butcher, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see Homelander getting beat to death by that same crowbar, especially if you know the comics. Now, I would imagine Kimiko uses her newfound powers and depowers Homelander, and the boys use the virus on him, and however that happens, I just know that at the end of the day, Butcher will probably be the one that kills him because it only makes sense for it to be Butcher. Now, I did think at one point in the season that maybe Homelander's going to survive, but he's going to have to live out the rest of his days without his powers. But after the last few weeks, I definitely think he's going to die. And just, I guess I'm going to say this is a spoiler because the showrunner said it himself. But if you guys don't want to know this, I'm warning you all now. The showrunner himself accidentally said in an interview he confirmed that Homelander will die. Now, let's switch gears and talk about the boys. I've said it all season that Hughie isn't going to die because he has the most plot armor of any character in the show. And since we saw Frenchie die, I also would thought that one of the couples won't be making it out of the season. So with Frenchie dead, Hughie's going to survive. That leaves us with Annie, who I think is going to live as well. And with that being said, I do think Hughie and Annie are going to live happily ever after together by the end of the show. Now, going back to the couples of the show, we know Frenchie died, which leaves Kimiko, who I do think will survive because I do think the show wants to give her a chance to live out her life in peace despite losing Frenchie. Now that brings us to MM, who I think maybe is the only character that has the second most chance of dying, but I really do feel like the show wants the boys to have a happy ending. So I'm going to give MM a 90% chance of surviving, and we're probably going to see him being reunited with his family again. Now, I know he's not a member of the boys, but let's talk about Ryan. Now, despite Ryan being seen in the cabin with Homelander alone, I don't see a world where he dies because if they wanted to play that card, they would have killed him back in, episode 3 when he fought his dad the first time. So even though, again, he's in a cabin with Homelander, which seems to be just them two alone, I don't think we're going to see Ryan die, so I'm going to give him a 100% chance of him living by the end of the season. And last but not least, what's going to happen to Butcher? Will he die alongside Homelander? I give that a 45% chance of that happening. Will he be killed by the boys, in particular maybe Hughie, after him wanting to unleash the virus on the Supes? I say there's a 50% chance of that happening. Or will Butcher kill Homelander, fight against the boys, but he's going to survive because they or Hughie spares his life and he gets to live on? I give that last one a 5% chance of Butcher living and the boys sparing his life, but again, there's a possibility. With all that being said, at the end of the day, I've been breaking down each episode, and I have been saying that some episodes, even though they have had their flaws, they've been good episodes of The Boys, but they haven't been good episodes for the final season of The Boys. So I am crossing my fingers. I'm really hoping that somehow, some way, by a miracle, that they stick the landing in an hour and 6 minutes. We get satisfying conclusions. The characters that are supposed to die, and they die in a satisfying manner. The characters that live on have a true meaning of why they're living on. And again, if we are setting up Vought Rising, we're setting up The Boys Mexico, that we're getting these characters set in a position that we get excited as an audience of seeing them again. But before seeing them in the future or in the past for Vought Rising, again, it all boils down to, I hope they stick the landing on this final episode of The Boys. So with all that being said, let me know what you all thought of the trailer. What did you all take away? What are your thoughts, your theories, your final predictions of what you all hope to see in the final episode? As of right now, just a little bit behind the scenes for those that have been following all my breakdowns, I have been fortunate enough to get the screeners in advance. So I've been watching the episode, breaking it down, week by week. I'd never watched ahead because what's the point of me watching ahead? Because that would defeat the purpose of me giving theories. So at the time of this recording, I don't have access to episode 8, but hopefully that changes so I can just have my episode ready for you all once the episode's available. But just in case it doesn't happen, expect my full breakdown to be available sometime Wednesday afternoon or maybe Wednesday night, but I just wanted to give you all a heads up. With all that being said, that will conclude this week's breakdown of the trailer and my final predictions. If you all are watching this on YouTube, I appreciate you all. Do me a favor, hit the like button, hype up the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel today. Alrighty, y'all, I will see you on the next video, which will be the final breakdown of The Boys. But in between then and now, I thank you all for watching or listening. Don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll see you on the next breakdown.